key figure in the creation of it, and this was the agency designed to help the state recover after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. Before the LRA, Adam was Economic Development Advisor to 2 governors and the Policy Director for Louisiana Economic Development, where he helped manage the department's economic policy initiatives. Prior to that, he worked for Accenture, which was a technology and management consultancy firm where he served as an emerging technology consultant. He's a graduate of Davidson College, and he also studied at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government, and I'm going to butcher this, the Julius Maximilians Universität in Würzburg, Germany. Please help me welcome Adam Knapp.
I was in there for your torture.
Pardon? Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Karen. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me back to join you again, and look forward to, as always, exciting Q&A after we go through some slides. As context to what I'm about to go through, many of you will be familiar with our work as an organization in economic development. Over the last close to 20 years, we've been a regional economic development group focusing on the economic development of the 9-parish capital region here in Baton Rouge. What we've been focused on, I could summarize largely as transactional work between companies trying to make a decision to invest here and grow, or new companies coming, or separately a focus on big strategic policy initiatives to try to figure out what issues we could tackle that would propel job creation and growth in the capital region. And those 2 big focus areas have driven our work in one way or another since we reorganized, probably back in 2005, 2006. And ever since then, we really have done different things to try to drive economic development. I'm going to go a few of the outcomes of the work from the last 6 years of our work. But what I want to set as context for this conversation is how economic development has changed after COVID. Or if we can't even use the phrase after COVID yet, let's say we can for the sake of rhetoric. But the important thing is to recognize that we know the world of economic development has changed. And inside of most organizations, there has been some sort of small or large shift of either how you work with your teams perhaps differently after COVID, or inside of your offices, how you treat one another or space out across your offices. Inside of organizations, how you recruit people is different today than it used to be. All of that is also played out across economic development about how our kinds of organizations do our work. And so back in January of last year, 2021, we hired Ernst & Young as a strategic consulting firm to help us evaluate where is Baton Rouge relative to its peer group across the Southeast broadly, and to understand how economic development has shifted inside of our organization across the peers that run economic development in all those communities, and then how does that affect what we should be doing next. So what I want to go through in the slides is to show you what we did over the last 6 years. I want to show you the data on Baton Rouge in a really high-level snapshot of where we are, and then based upon that data, what our economic development strategy looks like for the next 5 years. You're going to see and hear us refer to this as a campaign called Bring It. Over the last 10 months, we've been meeting in private, one-on-one with our investors to ask them to make a bet on us for the next 5 years, to fund this work with a game plan of where we are and where we need to be going. So now we want to share that with you. It's been so-called in silent mode, I guess, for the last 10 months. We are thrilled that we were able to announce the completion of that campaign last Wednesday at our campaign launch party at the Red Stick Social, a great event where we unveiled this work officially, and we're happy to be able to share it with the press club here today. The first thing I want to show you, and you'll see this in the handouts for those of you who are in the room, we had not actually updated our vision and mission statement in close to 20 years. What we recognize through this is we really want to make sure we can articulate our purpose as an organization first, and our purpose is to accelerate economic opportunity in the Baton Rouge area for everyone, with a recognition that is a big overarching encompassing statement. But in that statement, you can see how we exist and why we exist. We also asked our investors and our staff to help us put words around the core values about our organization that really in the water of our organization, I guess, it's really what makes us unique and successful as a team in doing this work. We also like to refresh, for everyone who doesn't know, we continue to be a regional economic development organization serving the 9-parish capital region, a population area of 850,000 people and 400,000 some non-farm jobs. Our job is to make sure we think of the entire kind of conception of what is economic development for all of these 9 parishes, for all the collective stakeholders that are a part of that work. Now, over the last 6 years, as I mentioned, we've been focused on business development work and big public policy initiatives. And I want to just give you a highlight of some of those things, and I think there's a little small insert in the handout that you can kind of see some of the results. We had about 93 economic development project wins over the course of the last 6 years, where our staff was somewhere materially involved with partners as these companies were making business development decisions. Now you can see a huge amount of capital investment came, close to $14 billion of committed capital to projects in the 9-parish region, very capital-intensive manufacturing projects by and large, and direct annual payroll, new annual payroll related to these projects, a little over $300 million of permanent direct payroll. Some of you may be familiar with Dr. Lawrence Scott's work. He'll do a multiplier effect, right, to tell you the many induced jobs that come. This is not that. This is the direct payroll from the project activity, and just over 6,000 direct new permanent jobs from those projects. So you can see the scope of our work has been successful, as well as some of the rankings that have been coming out for our organization, whether as a Chamber of Commerce or as an economic development firm, that we continue to get high-quality results nationally that reflect that the staff that we have, the team that we have, is among the best in the country doing this work. Also, just to give you a scope of, I can't show 93 logos on the screen, but what we want to show you is the breadth of the types of industry that are here. It's not just our traditional industrial base, but you'll see Pennington, a project that just announced last week, and working with Dr. Schauer and his team to create what is now Metamore, the bariatric center that's now at Pennington that just had its grand opening, was one of our economic development projects that our staff and LAD worked. As well as a number of tech companies. General Informatics' project to locate on Highland Road their new center, the At Highland facility, which saw a transaction, has now created 2 companies, that company plus 365 labs in that building. Or digital media companies, a post-production facility called Crafty Apes, which is located here in Baton Rouge, doing film post-production work. Quite a wide variety of the types of industries that are here. You'll also see existing companies as well as new companies. Everything from Grand Fuels, which is a new firm planning to build a sustainable aviation fuel facility in Port Allen, or existing firms like PacTech in East Feliciana, where our staff helped support an expansion project of an existing manufacturer who continues to grow and thrive. What we wanted to show you is the breadth of the types of industry projects that our team has worked, as well as some of the ways that we've done that to facilitate business development, including, we think, being probably the best regional group in the state certifying industrial sites for economic development. We did 13 additional sites where we certify those for business investment. And now we've actually seen companies like Methanex locating on certified sites that our staff and our parish partners have worked on over the course of the past few years. So in addition to that transactional work, you'll also see on the next 2 slides that our work was heavily focused on education, especially related to STEM, partnerships, and talent. And you can see each one of these has a specific outcome that came from it, whether that was working on new schools that are entering the market or expanding, partnerships with schools across the 9-parish region to focus on after-school business experiences, externships for their teachers. You can also see how we worked on one-on-one talent tours. We actually saw that companies were contacting us saying, hey, we know that we can sell the job. We would love it if you can help sell the community to incoming executives who aren't familiar with Louisiana, aren't familiar with Baton Rouge. We did close to 500 of those tours, had an over 90% success rate when somebody gets offered a position, and our team has done a tour for that job, that the person takes the job. And that's a support element to the talent work that we do to make sure that we're very intentionally focused on what that looks like. We also introduced a partnership 2 years ago to try to help our universities retain their graduates here after college, a partnership that we call the Handshake Initiative. You can go to brac.org/handshake, and employers can set up free accounts on Handshake to recruit college graduates. We became we announced last May, the first place in the country where all of our colleges and universities, public and private, 2-year and 4-year, are all on the same free app that small businesses can download and access the talent that's in our community. So we were focused on how do you make sure that the talent sourcing is available across the capital region. We also said we were going to focus aggressively on issues related to quality of life. That includes things like transportation. We went from probably $300 million of committed capital back in 2015 to now about $1.5 billion of committed capital to transportation projects here in the Capital Region, whether that's the widening of I-10, the 415 connector project, interstate expansions on I-10 out in Ascension Parish. What you can see is that focus through the Crisis Coalition, which we helped set up back in 2016, has been every year focused on making sure that business speaks with one voice, whether that's at the Capitol with parish presidents or to the public, about the priorities that we have for transportation initiatives. We also, in 2017, engaged a PR firm for the first time to have retained representation for the Capital Region to place stories in the national media about Baton Rouge to make sure that we were successfully telling our story outside of Louisiana. And that has yielded over 100 positive media mentions, where it's kind of like earned media placements for products, like when you see a Coca-Cola can in a movie just show up randomly that they're drinking. We've been doing that sort of thing for Baton Rouge, to put product placements about Baton Rouge in national media. So we also have seen an increasing focus on things like maintenance, blight, and litter. That came out of a lot of our work with the Quality of Place Committee at BRAC to really focus on the work of maintenance, try to elevate the reasons why we need to focus on litter. And still today we see momentum around that between the mayor's work around litter, most recently with the Governor Edwards task force, the statewide task force on litter. We want more of this drumbeat around community appearance to continue to spread. A lot of that work has been our focus going back to the creation of the Quality of Place Committee back in 2016. So what we want to do that is to show you through that how, when we set specific goals, we can achieve results for that. We can look multiple years out into the future with a problem we want to try to tackle, that we can actually achieve metric outcomes with that problem. And that is, I think, a precursor then to say, where are we as a Capital Region? So that we can then focus long-term on some solutions to these specific initiatives. So what we want to share with you is the data on Baton Rouge today. So when I told you we hired Ernst & Young, their economic development consulting practice, the reason we selected Ernst & Young is they happen to be, we think, the best firm, very data-driven at helping look at regions, use a set of data to understand where you are as a community and where you need to be heading. So in one slide, this is what it looks like. It's going to be tough to see in the room, so I'm going to try to interpret this for you, and we'll happily distribute this out to y'all if you want to see the specifics of this slide chart. But what this shows you in 6 categories is Baton Rouge in a snapshot. Over on the left-hand side, or my right-hand side, you'll see about 39 other cities, Baton Rouge, and about 39 other metros. These are roughly our size and population, roughly about a 1,000-mile radius out from Baton Rouge. Communities that are somewhere between 400,000 in population up as large as maybe 2 million in population. And the reason why Ernst & Young collected this group is they wanted to have enough comparisons that we can really drill into strengths and weaknesses and performance data across a wide variety of communities, but we didn't want to go too far away. So that 1,000-mile radius was to help make sure that we were still dealing, mostly looking across the southeast for comparison purposes. So these categories, so I'm just going to enumerate these in case you can't see these in the back. You have things like innovation and entrepreneurship. You have inclusivity up at the top, prosperity, connectedness, talent production, and livability. Now, the bigger the pie slice you can see on this screen, the better we did among the peer metro rankings. So, for example, this innovation and entrepreneurship category, we ranked 6th in the data set for that category relative to the 40 other communities, 39. And if you see down on livability, we ranked 40th out of that subgroup for livability factors. So what this one chart is trying to do is to help us, to help you, to help business leaders better understand where Baton Rouge is. And in this data, behind each of these, if you peel it back, there's about 8 different indicators for where Baton Rouge stands, that you can better understand kind of the drivers or the inputs or the outcomes of that category. So, for example, under livability, you have things that you can see here, a well-being index, I think that's the Forbes well-being index, a violent crime rate that you can pull data on, or average commute times. Or if you're under innovation and entrepreneurship, you'll see things like new startups in that community, employment formation, university R&D expenditures, or things like STEM talent production. So each of these contains kind of a bucket of data that's been collectively aggregated to a ranking for Baton Rouge. And so what I want to do is, in the next few slides, is pull out a handful of those that jumped out to us as really important for the purposes of setting strategic goals for Baton Rouge. This data is fascinating to really pull back. What you'll see in this one chart, though, is we are doing really well in some, really terribly in some others, and kind of in the middle of the pack on some other ones. But probably most importantly, we really want to elevate those that we think we have to talk about in earnest, about how that shapes economic development when this is a reality. So if y'all saw the census data that came out last year, right, the 2020 census data, Baton Rouge in large measure is growing faster even than predictions were. So we outpaced the census data estimates when the new census data information came out, which is a great sign. The bad sign, as this chart reveals, among the age group of 25 to 44-year-olds, we would describe that as young professionals. That age group, we saw in the last 7 years, only 1 year of positive net in-migration. The other 6 years were net negative years for out-migration for that age group. And so when we think about the challenges of Baton Rouge, we might think in our own minds about traffic issues, for example. We would say that's true, but you also should be paying attention to what could be really damaging to long-term growth if you don't see clear-eyed the challenges for attracting and retaining young professionals to have a really dynamic and growing metropolitan economy. The other thing that was interesting to us in the data is our job growth largely came from the sector construction between the years 2013 and 2018. What was unique when we compared that to the 39 other cities is Baton Rouge was the only city where construction was the leading source of job creation. And what of course happened during that period, now many of you will remember, natural gas prices fell in 2011. During 2013 to 2015, we had close to $200 billion of projects announced throughout the Gulf Coast. And the industrial construction sector in Baton Rouge was absolutely surging. So that was a great sign. We had an incredible amount of growth. What we didn't see, and what we saw in a lot of the other 39 other peer cities, is that other sources of jobs were being created in their community. That might have been coming from healthcare, might have come from transportation and logistics, or software and IT. What you don't see here is as diverse a set of sectors contributing to overall job growth. And so that's what we would elevate from this, is this really should put us on a focus for why it's important to further diversify our capital region economy. The next chart that jumped out to us was around economic inclusion. So you might ask the question, why is economic inclusion related to economic development? And so we put that exact same question to Ernst & Young. And what they came back and said was, of the 6 categories that we pulled data, the one that has the clearest correlation to job growth is economic inclusion. You can see kind of this correlation line mapped out here. So these are dots of the 40 communities, and the ones at the upper right-hand side were the ones that saw not only the fastest job growth, but also they had more folks participating in the benefits of their economy on those categories of economic inclusion data. So this is a aggregated ranking score for all our metros, and then compared or correlated the performance for non-farm job growth. And what you can see from this is when you have more folks participating in your economy, like you see in, say, Fayetteville, Arkansas, they have higher overall job growth in those communities, which is really interesting for an economic development organization to pull that back and understand how these two things are connected. The last thing, of course, since I mentioned it, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about traffic. It remains an issue for all of our families and our companies in our community. In this one chart, you can see why. We are the 66th biggest metropolitan region in America, in the Baton Rouge area, and we had in 2021, just a few months ago, the 4th worst traffic per capita according to the TomTom Index. This is a GPS services company that measures this. And what that shows you is that even as we have seen major committed dollars to construction projects, it continues to be a major challenge for our community that we have enormously challenging traffic. So there is a horizon that we can see where it's going to get better when Move BR projects get built, when the widening is completed, when a new bridge is committed to and funded. But there is a long way to get to that horizon from where we are today. And unfortunately today, it has to continue to be a high focus and a high priority. So what do we do with the data that we just went through? How does that then affect how we think about economic development? We call it now, we're ready to bring it. This is our strategy for the next 5 years of our work. This is what we shared with you in the charts, in the handout that's in front of you. So the big 4 goals, I want to kind of share with you how this changes. As I started my remarks, I said that we have to recognize that economic development has changed in this kind of new world after COVID. And what we recognize is that among all the possible things that BRAC can do, talent must be described as that number one thing. You saw that young professional chart. We have to recognize that the work that we do, not for 1 year, not for 2 years, but over many, many years, needs to continue to focus on the challenges of talent. And so we said that needs to be first among equals of the big 4 goals that you'll see here. But you'll see these big 4 goals named as accelerating our talent pipeline, diversifying further our industry base in the Baton Rouge area, creating a more inclusive economy, and really enhancing our community's livability. What I think you'll also see, each one of these, if you kind of think about these, are deeply connected to the others. We did some surveying work last year. One of the responses we saw significantly in our EY work when we saw these survey data is that a lot of the respondents, when they asked about why you choose to live here or what might drive you to leave, it was that the community does not feel inclusive to many people. It doesn't feel open and welcoming. And when you recognize that as a truth, that issue can affect your talent migration just as much as livability can, whether that's schools, traffic, or crime concerns. And so you'll see how these things are all deeply interconnected. What we actually laid out, and our EY did a great job of this, our advisory committee and board did a really great job of this, is saying each one of these needs to have a specific metric goal that we set as our way to know if we're moving in the right direction but toward what we're trying to accomplish. And the metric goal for talent, we think, has to be increasing the percentage of our population who are in that young professional age range, that 25 to 44-year-old group. What you'll see laid out here are the new tactics that we set forth that for the next 5 years we have to add to our mix of work that we haven't been doing or we haven't been doing enough of. The first here, we kind of describe this as the Talent Bold Initiative, is that we really have never invested in external marketing of Baton Rouge as a talent campaign. And we've seen communities like Chattanooga, like Atlanta, even as big as Atlanta is, they have a talent marketing campaign. Memphis, most recently, we've seen announce them. A lot of the chambers and economic development groups across our country that we held up as peers are deeply now committed to investing in talent marketing, recognizing that how they compete for talent has a lot to do with how their community is going to continue to grow. We also have seen some really important partnerships of how business community does a better job of being engaged and integrated in a partnership with education. We see this, and I'll use an example that we saw in Jacksonville, Florida, where their community, their business community has staged out committees of industry sectors that are going to be the future of their economy to make sure that the companies within that community are meeting on a monthly and quarterly basis with education stakeholders, not just LSU and Southern, making sure the community colleges are in that mix, but as deep down as getting into our schools for K-12, where superintendents across the region and all of those partners are sitting at a table with business leaders to discuss how best to find soft skills education, very specific hard skills that are needed for these industries, as well as potentials for internships or apprenticeships in those businesses as young as in high school, but definitely while they're in college, to access the benefits of the economy. And so we see this as the Talent Action Collaborative that we're launching to try to form a team that does that exact same work here in the Capital Region. I talked to you about Handshake earlier. What we've seen is the early successes of partnering on retaining college graduates has to go even deeper. So about a month and a half ago, we announced a new partnership with Forum 225. This is our community's strongest young professional organization to say to them, we need to help promote more corporate partnerships with Forum to make sure that more of our companies recognize as they help their new hires set roots in the community, in the neighborhoods, in their social networks, that increases the likelihood that they stay here for longer after college. It is through those social connections, as much as their job opportunities, that we will be able to strengthen the chances that they stay for the jobs at those companies. And so we wanted to launch that partnership early in this agreement. We also added a member of Forum 225's leadership to our board of directors about a month ago. We also just launched a new talent portal. This is something we've seen in other communities, New Orleans, in Atlanta, where they have created regional job boards as part of their talent marketing to make sure that their companies in their community can find the jobs across their community. So about a month ago, we launched brworks.org. It's been a huge hit already. The folks that are going to see that website as their primary job search portal. We partnered up with EmployBR and the library and a number of others who help job job seekers to learn how to use this tool. And what's really amazing about it is you can upload a resume, it scans that resume for keywords that become a skills criteria, that then it matches up the jobs that are in Baton Rouge with your skills to help advise you what's the best match for you among what's out there today. And that's being refreshed daily by our technology partner that's the back end of that website. Really amazing tool. But we show that as one of the initiatives we think that's going to be key over the next 5 years to this work. And the second priority to diversify our economy, what we recognized is we had not really been doing as much as we needed to be focused on to help support emerging sectors to grow here in the Baton Rouge area. So we've committed that we have to make sure that our big goal is focused on 500 at least new jobs from at least healthcare and life sciences, software and IT firms, the water sector, kind of think of that as kind of broadly the sustainability work that you see at the water campus, as well as the opportunities around transitional energy. And if you've been paying attention to what's been happening in the last 2 years, almost every, if not every major petrochemical company between Baton Rouge and New Orleans is working on a strategy to move toward net zero for carbon emissions. And that means there's an enormous amount of investment that's coming over the next 20 years as these big industry players start to think through what that looks like for themselves, for new partners, and for new technologies to enter the marketplace. Along with our organization, we partnered with Greater New Orleans, Inc. for an application that was submitted last week for what could be over a $70 million award to help focus on new job creation opportunities that can come as all of South Louisiana moves toward opportunities around decarbonization that are coming. And these are some of the things we think are going to be part of the future of competing for new jobs as we think about how we diversify the economy for the future. The third thing I want to highlight is this piece of our strategy related to economic inclusion. We thought a lot about what we saw on that last chart where we were 39th out of 40 communities for the data for economic inclusion. When you think about that data, it's things like the gap between a black household, a Hispanic household, and a white household in Baton Rouge for household income. And it was 39th of the 40 communities that our gap was the widest here in Baton Rouge. And shame on us as a community, shame on us as BRAC for not doing more over the last 20 or 30 years to make sure that was central to our work in economic development, but it must be going forward. So we saw a handful of things that we need to be doing that our peers in economic development are also starting to focus on. And we think not only can we catch up, but we can pass some of the initiatives that we've seen. We named that the bold goal, this kind of big strategic goal should be to try to focus on disinvested communities, to seek to use our resources to bring together private investment to leverage up to about $100 million to reinvest into our communities. And the ways that we try to accomplish that need to be varied. But the effort we thought would be most interesting would be to set up a for-profit redevelopment fund where investors in this community can pool together to make investments into those communities for a for-profit return, but trying to make sure they're doing that conscientiously with neighborhoods to try to draw in capital into those communities. We also have seen examples in Cincinnati, in Tampa, in Greenville, South Carolina, where the Chamber runs a minority business accelerator to try to help existing businesses to propel their growth. And in Cincinnati, we saw examples where they had a company that had $1 million in revenue, where they helped them become a firm with $100 million in revenue over the last 15 years. And we looked at that and we said that would be an amazing outcome if we saw that kind of investment happening to not only create wealth and access to jobs, but to create reinvestment into neighborhoods as that occurs. We've also seen already some victories here. We put in about a year ago for a $1 million award to set up in Baton Rouge the first ever women and minority-owned business fund with True Fund. That was awarded in July. They've already begun working on access to capital for women and minority-owned businesses through microloans through that fund. It will be a perpetual revolving loan fund that will always have to be here. We hope to grow that over the next 5 years. And the last one I'll highlight here is a project we started out about 2 years ago that we want to continue to grow, which we call the Baton Rouge Procurement Opportunity Partnership. Think of the purchasing power of our largest businesses in Baton Rouge, whether that's in healthcare, in our casinos, in our industrial partners, or in government. And when you pool the resources that they have to buy local from women, minority, or veteran-owned businesses, we can have an enormous impact in this kind of B2B network to make sure that our firms here are finding ways to get access to work, right, to business, to investment through the local purchasing power of our companies here locally. We started that out. We have about 26 partners already sending their procurement officers to quarterly meetings and bids coming through in partnership with Metromorphosis. This is one that we want to continue to scale the success of this program. We think we can have a significant impact on not only business formation, but capital investment and growth related to economic inclusion. The last thing that I'll highlight is probably going to be a little bit different for y'all to think about is related to livability. So, of course, we think about things like litter or beautification when we think about this. We think about the fact that we need to have more investment in solutions toward transportation. And I want to highlight some specific things around that. But I also want to show you where it needs to go next. When we talk about transportation, of course, after all the things that have occurred, probably the most important big lift remaining is to focus on that bridge project. And so we think we have the potential to see that done, not only with the work of this legislative session, with the prior few years of efforts to create the Capital Area Road and Bridge District, to have the $300 million from the vehicle sales tax that was passed last session, as well as this big down payment that's been proposed by the Edwards administration of $500 million. When all those things come together, we can see the path to a bridge is very close. What we've heard from Secretary Sean Wilson at DOTD is they'd like to see this finish its environmental process, name the bridge locations, and put it out for bid potentially as soon as 2024, that we'd actually be looking at a design-build contract for that project with the idea that that's a 5 to 6 to 7 year project of construction and design. We want to get to that as soon as possible. But during the course of this 5-year campaign of our work, our goal and our expectation is to see that effort really funded and moving forward so that we can no longer say when will it happen, when will it get funded. We'll know exactly the path forward, that it's funded, and that there's a firm on contract to build that sucker. We all need to see it done. We also think that the train project between Baton Rouge and New Orleans is more close than ever. Another super regional effort we've done with New Orleans for a long time to champion the idea of what is this project, not only for what it can do for transportation benefits, but also for what it does to put us out there as doing something really unique to connect our two downtowns with a project like an intercity passenger rail operated along what will be the Canadian Pacific Rail Line and run and operated by Amtrak as the operational partner. These conversations continue on an almost monthly basis to move this project forward. We hope to see this calendar year an inspection train move forward to make sure that we can evaluate the quality of the rail line, moving forward to the place where you actually start to see intercity operational trains during this 5-year period. But all of these things, if they actually accomplish one thing related to livability, it is our confidence in ourselves. What we've recognized over the course of visiting with our businesses over the last 10 months is we are our own worst enemy in many cases, and when we hurt ourselves for talent migration. We hurt ourselves for business investment. And it spreads negative perceptions, in many cases that are actually just wrong or ill-informed. What we recognize is it starts at home, that we have to build our perceptions. And so we actually said that our overall goal over the next 5 years has to be to boost our positive perceptions in ourselves in a measurable way. And so we did a regional perception study back in December, setting a baseline of data for what we know about ourselves. What do we think about ourselves as residents of the 9-parish area, such that 5 years from now we'll be able to tell whether we've moved the mark, move the needle on that effort. Not only that projects have gotten moved forward, but that our knowledge and awareness of the things that are going in the right direction helps boost our own confidence in the direction we have as a community. All of these big 4 goals, we have to make sure that we're transparently sharing the data on where we are. One of the things we liked about what Ernst & Young did was they put it out very transparently, that you take off the rose-colored glasses, right? You see it as it is. What we want to make sure this year is we launch an annual dashboard where you will also be able to see the updates annually of where we started in the data metrics to where we progress over time toward 2026. So this gives you some examples of some of the data that will be on that dashboard, which Andrew Fitzgerald gets the joy of making sure that he updates on our team. Now, why does it matter that we had a fundraising effort? So when I look at this chart, this is how BRAC, sort of funding-wise, stacks up to its peers. So you can see that now there are some major organizations in metros. We would not necessarily normally say Dallas or in Austin is a population comparator to Baton Rouge. But what you can know is that in terms of talent, we compete with these communities. In terms of companies, we compete with these communities. And their economic development organizations are incredibly well-heeled, as you can see in this data. Now, BRAC was about a $5.4 million organization. And I would say we punch above our weight class in the rankings and the reputation and the quality of this team. But when Mobile, that is just slightly bigger, slightly smaller than us in population, is slightly better funded than us, it shows you why we had to go out there and say to our investors, look, guys, it's time to bring it. We need to step up the funding to this organization so that we can compete at a higher level, elevate our strategy for this work, and make sure that our team can accomplish what you're asking us to. When we asked Ernst & Young price for us what you think this campaign is going to cost us. They looked at this budget and they said, look, you're looking at least at another $1 million of resources that it would take to fund that work. And so we said, well, first, as you would in any of your own organizations, we have to cut back and find ways to reprioritize the dollars in our organization to try to do as much as we can first and foremost from within the existing resources that we have. After doing that, we set a campaign goal of another $600,000 we thought we had to raise in order to, at a minimum, begin to try to execute this campaign. And what we were pleased to announce last week is as of January, we had hit our fundraising goal after months and months of work, over probably 300 one-on-one or small group meetings with executives. We saw an enormous response. Almost every investor across the board said, we'll do more if we can. We saw about a 30% increase across the board of our existing investors, as well as another probably 20 new investors that weren't involved with BRAC at all before, who stepped up their investment to join and become more involved. And that work is going to continue. We recognize that what we have is a kind of a baseline minimum, as you can see, to compete, and we have to do more to get even better situated to compete. But what I'm pleased to say is we now have hit that campaign goal, and we're ready to charge forth to bring forward these goals to a reality. And so as we say, we're ready to bring it. We hope you are too. Now we're ready to take your questions about how we accomplish this work together for the Baton Rouge area over the next 5 years. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Bill, I was looking at all the initiatives and all the things you said out there. And I know it's a silly question maybe to ask, but what is going to be the hardest goal to reach? And what you think is the most important goal right now in this time? Yeah,
well, I think all 4 of these must occur. That's why we only wanted to have 4, was we wanted to narrow it as much as we can to those things. We have to move the needle on all 4 of these goals. If we do not, we're not going to be competitive as an economy, and that's really what's important, I would think, is to say all 4 of these are absolutely critical. The reason we talk about talent first is we think all of these, at the end of the day, are about making sure we're more competitive for retaining and attracting people. And at the end of the day, this is a people-centric plan to make sure that we're thinking about how we accomplish that big overarching goal, that they all really yield to the benefit of making sure that we're able to keep the people here and move more folks here over the next 5 years. And so if there's one data point that I personally think is important, is that one, but I think all of them are part of making it likely that we can accomplish that goal.
All my life, even though I've been in government a lot of times, my whole family and kids around me, the chemical and petrochemical industry right now. And like you said, a lack of trained people. It works. It used to be good. We had apprenticeship programs that did it. And I see y'all always on that subject, but with what's going on right now in Ukraine and around the world, is that going to escalate more work in the petrochemical industry, or is it going to slow it down?
Yeah, it's a great question. The question is, with what's happening in Ukraine and internationally today, do we think that's going to accelerate or slow down what's happening in the petrochemical sector? Today, I can only tell you from what's happening within our company and our business development projects, we have seen no slowing down of project activity. Right now, there is seems like a fevered pitch of activity to build, to look for opportunities for projects. And I think that's true across a lot of regions right now, that there's just a significant amount of activity happening across all of our sectors, frankly, not just in the petrochemical sector.
We're so dependent on that.
We absolutely are. And we've heard from our companies that they expect that over the next 2 years, it will look and feel a lot like what it looked and felt like back in 2013. Labor shortages, just because of the amount of investment and construction happening across the economic development landscape, across the project landscape, that we need to be focusing as a region to make sure that the community has access to the benefit of the jobs, that the training is reaching into non-traditional labor sources to try to help them find ways to get into the jobs. And I think what you're seeing, even in the front page story of The Advocate, the story about what's changing in education today is very much a story about how to make sure more folks as early as possible are learning about about how to access and tap into the jobs that are out there, and we have to all be thinking creatively about how to do that. But you're absolutely right. This is a really amazing time in industrial activity. We would say it also needs to be that same thing across tech. Like we've seen just a few months ago, a company, Rural Sourcing, located a new technology company, RSI, right in the heart of downtown, largely driven by the fact that we have great sources and supplies of tech talent and that are at a great labor price relative to what it costs for that same talent on the coasts. So we can use this advantage in other sectors as well if we can make sure that our story gets out there and focusing on ways that we diversify the economy. David?
A couple unrelated questions. Number one, you mentioned the new bridge. Seems like there's been a lot of pushback against making that down payment for the new bridge in the legislature. Maybe you can comment on that. And I was also curious about what Baton Rouge's historically high rates of violent crime, how that complicates efforts to recruit both companies.
Yeah, so the two questions, I'm going to take them kind of back to back. The first was the seeming pushback among some legislators at the Capitol on the bridge funding. The second has to do with kind of the rate of violent crime and how that affects the business community and economic development. So the first question, I think what's important is that the legislature absolutely needs to make a statement this year on transportation. A big dollar figure needs to be placed forward so that we can show potential investors, project proposers that we're serious about this project. Last year was a great demonstration of that when the vehicle sales tax dedication occurred, David. More needs to be done. We need to make sure that we remain united as a state, that this is the most significant transportation project facing Louisiana today. There are some important projects we have to do across the state, right? We know where I'm from in Lake Charles absolutely needs to get a replacement bridge, and there needs to be more resources for I-49 and Shreveport where they have some specific projects, I-49 South. There's projects across the state like those, but of the ones that you could see, none of them have their traffic data as bad as this one, and we all can see that one potential project has an enormous impact in the long run, not only on traffic relief and traffic alternative choices, but on economic development and economic growth for this capital region. So this project needs to be worked through. Now, what we've heard from our members, across this capital region is they want to see this project move forward. They want to make sure that the dollars that are needed are there when they're needed. What we want to make sure is that they continue to work together as a delegation to figure out what's the right amount, how much can they get done, and can they make sure that they can bring along the rest of the state. This is a big project. There's a lot of needs across the state. We need to make sure that all of those needs can be addressed even as we hold up this project as a singular priority that has to get done.
Does it delay the project if you don't get that $500 million down payment this session?
So all the pieces that I outlined before they're already still on track. What this is a dollar commitment to show that the state is serious and ready and committed to this project to potential bidders. So when we see this come forward in the next 2 years, this may be a once-in-a-lifetime moment where the state has the resources to make a big capital commitment to a big kind of signature project for Louisiana. And we should think forward, think big about the state and not just kind of think small about, all the many challenges, but what is that big priority the state needs to accomplish that is going to help the entire state. We all have to drive through the Baton Rouge area, whether you're from Lake Charles or Shreveport or New Orleans. At some point, if you're crossing the state, you're crossing through this bottleneck. So it's kind of a collective problem for the state's economy to try to deal with this, and we hope the legislators will see that. To the question about violent crime, it remains an urgent concern for businesses. It probably was either the top or the second concern when we were meeting with folks about this plan, and we heard folks, expressing concerns about the rate of violent crime, especially the murder rate in Baton Rouge, and what can be done about that. And what we've seen is business leaders coming to the table, meeting with our police, our sheriff, our district attorney, meeting with the mayor president's office, trying to ask them, what can we do to help? And we saw 3 or 4 things come out from those conversations. One is make it possible if you have a venue where you can actually have a crime camera installed, find a way to have a crime camera installed and available and visible at your site. The second big thing is to be active in talking about the challenges of recruiting folks into policing. Right now there are tremendous labor shortages across all employment, but it's definitely true in the police department, in the sheriff's department, even in the district attorney's office. That challenge is exacerbating some of these problems. And so while we feel it in business across the labor market, it's definitely playing out as well inside of our police departments. And so employers can help to make sure we're talking about the value and the importance of this as a career so that more folks are considering and celebrating why it's important to go to work in these businesses. The third big thing is trying to be present and offering ways to help. And so we've seen a lot of business owners reaching out to us or reaching out to the police department, asking how they can be involved to try to tackle these problems. And we think that's going to continue to help make sure that there is a clear line of communication. The foundation, as a Criminal Justice Foundation, has been chaired by Clay Young, has been doing a lot of work to try to raise resources to support the police with foundation dollars. And we really amplify and support that work as being important to make sure that business owners can stay connected and invested into that fight.
We have time for one more.
One more question.
I wanted to know if you could give us a status on Amazon.
Sure. The Amazon investment that's happening at the old Cortana site continues to surprise us all. If you've driven by recently, it's an enormous structure. It's a 5-story structure. The expectation is it'll be completed in 2023. Their construction is just going at a gangbuster rate. We saw crews over the weekend, even during St. Patrick's Day festivals, out there day and night working. So they are pulling as much time as they can on that project. And so it's on pace and on track, and we expect it to be an enormously important project for the future. Remember, they already have an operating site off Segan Lane that has about 350 employees. The Port Allen facility has over 500 employees that was opened last year. And so they have been growing, and we expect them to continue to do so in Baton Rouge. That project is just going to be super exciting to watch how it unfolds. The other thing that we think is amazing is what is happening by virtue of that project coming to Florida Boulevard to drive additional interest in redeveloping Florida Boulevard, a really important historic street and corridor for Louisiana, not just Baton Rouge. Last year, the Metro Council created a Cortana Boulevard Economic Development District. And so one of the things we hope to see happen this year is to see a master plan for the revitalization of Florida Boulevard. The resources of that Economic Development District should be sufficient to go bring in the world's greatest urban designers to make sure that they can draw out a plan for what it's going to look like once Move BR is finished and once other private investors come together, that it can create something that has a vision that is a beautiful revitalized Florida Boulevard for the importance that it is the connecting corridor of our community across north and south. It's a great question. I think that's the last opportunity. Thank you all for having me, and we appreciate your interest.
I noticed Coleman.